there, Mama. I'm Courtney Cecil, proud mom of two boys and an organizational culture and behavior change executive. And I'm a believer in building a movement to help the burned out, overwhelmed working moms reclaim their control and free time so that they can confidently remain in the workforce without losing the sanity or themselves. Now, let's get started.
Hey y'all, I'm your host, Courtney Cecil, and welcome back to another episode of the Life Management System. And inside this episode, I am so excited to host Meredith Carder, who's an ADHD coach, a content creator, and author of It All Makes Sense Now, or It Makes Sense Now. So many of you I know either struggle with ADHD yourselves or have a partner or family member who does as well. So Meredith's book, It Makes Sense Now, validates the challenges that you probably are experiencing if you're facing ADHD and provides some empowering strategies for your personal growth. So I'm tickled to have her here and unpack some of the myths and the opportunities you might have. But Meredith, before I get into the questions, I would love to turn it over to you and tell the listeners a little bit more about your story.
Sure. So I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a mom to three kids. I discovered I had ADHD really kind of at the same time we discovered my daughter had ADHD. As we were going through the diagnostic process for her, I was reading all the questions and thinking, these all apply to me too. So that was a huge shift for me. It made everything make sense, which, is a lot of the reason my book has the title. It does. And it really gave me a new framework for how I was going to approach motherhood, how I wanted to approach my career. And it just provided a lot of answers to questions I had had for a really long time about why certain things were hard for me or why I struggled in ways that other people didn't seem to understand.
Gosh, I can't imagine how enlightening that must have been for you and how frustrating it must have been to look backwards and been like, wow, had that not been undiagnosed for so long, I could have been in control in a completely different way. So, knowing that you have gone through that specific experience, how might you bring to bear for listeners the difference between like traditional busy mom brain, because we all got it, versus what really might be an undiagnosed ADHD?
So I think one thing that's really important to understand about ADHD is many of the symptoms are things that every human being might struggle with from time to time. ADHD is diagnosed based on like a constellation of symptoms coming together and the degree of impact. So it's also really important to know that that impact should be able to be noted all the way back towards childhood. So if you are struggling in a way that's new for you, if you are struggling with things that maybe like showed up every once in a while before, but all of a sudden seem really intense, uh, look backwards and see if there's a way those things were showing up throughout your entire life. It can be very, very tricky because oftentimes we think of the stereotypes like, oh, did you do well in school? A lot of women, especially, mask their ADHD really well. So they may have done well in school, but had a lot of behind the scenes struggles with studying. They might have been able to compensate in certain ways, but had a lot of things that they had to create elaborate systems for. So ADHD doesn't just show up in a certain circumstance. It's there the whole time. And you really have to be able to look back and see that evidence to know, is this truly ADHD or is this my current circumstances causing so much stress that I'm having those focus issues and issues keeping up?
Got it. So, what I believe I hear you saying, catch me if I'm misstating this. It is a lot of the focus and attention showing up pervasively in all stages of life, not just the current stage in life, that is probably the indicator that it possibly could be ADHD instead of just overcapacity mom.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more symptoms under the umbrella of ADHD beyond just focus and attention.
Mhm.
There's symptoms of emotional dysregulation. There's executive function issues, so prioritizing, pacing, issues with rumination, things like that. Impulsivity is under that umbrella. So there's a lot more symptoms than the name implies with ADHD. So I would say too, if you're really like looking to explore whether this is ADHD or not, get familiar with the diagnostic criteria. Start to do some research on what are the symptoms the providers are looking for to diagnose this, and then take that backward look to see if they've been showing up for you your whole life.
I'm so glad that we got to that more elaborate level because so many of the women that I work with experience some degree of rumination and exec level functioning and that sort of thing that you've just referenced. So how might that actually show up for them? Like in what ways might that become an even bigger hurdle as it relates to time management or task management, the middle load, that sort of stuff? How would ADHD specifically be impacting those tasks and what recommendations might you have to help somebody overcome that?
I like to say to people that have ADHD that for you, the easy things are probably hard and the hard things are easy. And what I mean by that is some of the everyday tasks that we are kind of faced with when we are mothers and we're working and just living our daily adult lives are things that other people can do pretty automatically. They may not love it. They might not love doing their laundry. They might not love trying to be on time to work every day, but they're able to execute that with like out having to have a bunch of strategies to get through it. Oftentimes, some of the things that we are required to do for ADHD are just not in our wheelhouse. I'll give an example if that helps.
Yeah.
So, something like just doing the laundry. Yeah, it's annoying. Most of us don't like it. But for people with ADHD, a lot of us have impairment with our working memory. So that means that those tasks that we're taking a piece of information and applying it to the next step is hard for us. So we put the laundry in the morning. We don't think about that laundry again until it's been sitting there for 8 hours. And then we have to rewash that laundry. And then it takes days to get the laundry done instead of being able to work through that within like one work from home day or one weekend day. So that just creates a lot more bandwidth. And then it also creates shame and negative self talk that we can't just remember to do these things. So that would be an example of those easy things becoming extra hard for us with ADHD. And then when that kind of applies to a lot of the tasks we're facing every day, our bandwidth just gets really, really stretched quickly.
And I'm sure your mental load too, because when you are constantly filling the pinging back and forth, when you feel like you're falling short, I imagine that I could see spiraling negative talk and that sort of thing being very pervasive.
Mhm.
And which I think you just referenced. So I love that you played that out with a specific example. And the industrial engineer in me automatically goes to problem solving mode. I just can't help it. But as an ADHD coach yourself, you must really pull on some of these examples and the own coaching you do with your clients and your community. How might you get play out another example or even play off that one, Meredith, where you introduce some systems or routines that might help create structure so that that task becomes a little less overwhelming or a little bit more in control for that person.
For that example, I think a structure that really can help is creating some kind of visual reminder that you're in the middle of that task. So that helps for those tasks like laundry that can't be done all in one shot. So what I do is I start that load of laundry and I put that laundry basket in the middle of my living room floor, the empty one, so that when I am walking around during the day, I'm practically tripping over that laundry basket. And that gives me that mental reminder, oh, you need to switch that load. And it may seem kind of silly and kind of annoying that we have to throw a laundry basket in the middle of our path to be able to remember, but it's such a simple thing to do that doesn't require using an app or logging into something to try to remember. Another thing I do is I like to do like a pot meal a lot of days of the week. It really helps with like the busy mom in the evenings with kids that are in a million activities. But oftentimes I'll drop the kids off at school and completely forget I had that plan to make that for dinner until it's too late to get that food in the crock pot. So I will put the crock pot in the middle of my kitchen island the night before to have that visual cue of, okay, this is a priority. This is something you need to remember to do. And when I see that, when I walk back into the house, it cues me.
I love that. And I think whoever is listening out there, please listen to that because it doesn't matter if you have ADHD or not. That is a very helpful and simple system that you can put in place to make your effectiveness a little bit more predictable. Like I live by those type of philosophies, Meredith. I talk a lot about an example of with my husband. Nobody in our family has ADHD, but we just are full. When you have so much going on, it's easy for your brain to be at capacity and you to let little things slip. And one of the most tangible examples I talk about is um the dishwasher. My husband, who's a late night snacker, always needs to be the one to start the dishwasher. So that way, when we get up in the morning, we can empty it and the sink's never full. But he was consistently forgetting to turn it on. So it is so easy for us to just put his toothbrush and the dishwasher pods beside each other. Cause then every time he goes to get his toothbrush at night, like he's seeing the pods, the dishwasher pods. Or like, gosh, some of the others, anytime I'm leaving for work, I will put sticky reminders on my alarm before I walk out the house. Like, you need to remember to get like bring your lunch today or whatever it is. It's those visual reminders do us. It was so easy and that makes so much sense. Wildly applicable. It doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah, I love a visual reminder. I think it really is so much easier because if we're relying on a list that's hidden in our phone, we have to remember to look at that list. But if we have some physical object in our environment that we can't avoid seeing, it can really help.
Yeah. So what about kids? So coaching adults is one thing, but coaching kids, I would imagine that you might have a next level of complexity around helping them be at their best and helping them overcome some of those organic challenges that they have. What might some tips be that you have for people if they are trying to help their kids improve their own effectiveness? If they have ADHD, what recommendations might you have?
There's a couple things that I think are really important to understand about kids with ADHD. Two out of my three kids have ADHD. So this is something I've dived into quite a bit. The first thing I tell parents is that the science bears out that children with ADHD develop about 3 years behind their peers. So their brains are not always as ready to take on tasks that other kids might be able to. So we might think an 8-year-old should be able to do certain chores, but if your child has ADHD, their executive functioning is going to be closer to like a 5 or 6-year-old. That doesn't mean their brains don't catch up. That doesn't mean they're not going to get there. But sometimes we are really pushing for something that our child just isn't ready for. So understanding that piece and kind of reframing expectations can be really, really helpful. I also think it's so important to not prescribe a system for your child, but to work with them collaboratively on a system to help them with their struggles. So asking them, why is this task hard for you? Why are you struggling to do this? And be really, really curious about their answers. Help them come up with a system that works really well for you.
I love that. I think that is absolutely genius, but it also is empathetic. It's human. It's just acknowledging that regardless despite the ADHD, they are a human that needs respected and processes something differently than you do. So I think that that's just a really wise parenting philosophy in general, Meredith. So thank you so much for imparting that wisdom on me, especially in addition to the people listening. I also imagine, particularly if you are a parent that doesn't have ADHD yourself, or even if you are, it's hard not to become impatient with our kids particularly when life gets really busy and you're having to move fast and you're constantly late for things. It's that much harder to check our patience. What type of coaching would you offer somebody that might suffer from that level of patience or might be tempted to step in and do it for them? I know like that is a default of many millennial parents is that we have a lot of great things going for us that we have learned and have overcompensate on that we felt like we did not have growing up. But one of the things that we don't excel in is is letting the children do them themselves, like go through the hard lessons themselves. That is something that that we probably have an opportunity to improve in. So, like, what might your coaching and recommendations be for someone who's either losing their patience or trying to step in, or something of that nature, relative to helping groom and condition and parent their children?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we all struggle with parents, patience especially. Like I struggle in that area quite a bit myself. It is so much easier to just do it for our kids sometimes, especially when we have too much on our plate. So I think sometimes we do have to look at these areas. There's a tendency, I think, to want to like be all or nothing. So if we're feeling like, okay, I'm doing everything for my kid, I want to stop. We're going to stop doing anything for our kid immediately. And that's a lot of times way too much at once for our child. So pick the one thing that you think will have the most impact and work on that one at a time so that you're not overloading both your kid and yourself. You're not like taking 4 hours to get out of the door in the morning because all of a sudden we have all of these brand new expectations. So go slow would be one of those answers. And then, a quote from one of the most prominent researchers on ADHD, Dr. Barkley, that I heard that really impacted me as a parent is to aim to be a shepherd versus an architect. So you are shepherding your kids and you're moving them closer and you're giving them a little bit of direction versus you are building your kid. You're not building their life for them. You're letting them have enough autonomy with giving them gentle nudges along the way. And I use that advice to really like reflect on quite often with the choices I'm making with my child and thinking about what's my personal motivation for wanting to do this thing for my kid. Is it because I need to get to work on time? Okay, maybe there's something else that we can fix
Mhm.
before trying to force something.
I love that quote. Definitely will be quoting that myself. Where'd you say that came from?
It's Dr. Barkley.
Okay, yeah, genius. Um, but also I talk a lot and with my clients about this notion of breathing room and how we build breathing room into their system, into their routines. And I think there's an element of that you're also referencing, Meredith, where it's, part of it's just the sustainability of building slow so that you are able to actually develop the systems and not overwhelm it. But the other part is we have tendencies in this very virtual world of ours to just stack things on top of each other. It's one event after the other, and people just keep getting busier. But in the spirit of doing that, we also strip any breathing room out of our ability to flex 5 minutes this way or that way. And it definitely tests is probably one of the bigger contributors to testing our patience and the ability to feel like we're constantly in control of things.
Yeah,
So
oftentimes we're like operating way outside of our capacity, and that's where a lot of the issues come from for sure.
yes, exactly. Along that same vein of parenting a kid that has ADHD, how might you best advocate for them or even yourself most of the almost all of my listeners are working moms. So if you yourself have ADHD, what do you believe is an important philosophy or nugget as it relates to advocating for what your needs are or what your kids' needs are?
So I think about how I want my children to ultimately be their own self advocate. And one thing that I think is really important to remember is I won't be able to accomplish that if I don't show and model advocacy for my own self. So oftentimes that means having boundaries with your kids. Sometimes that means saying no to an activity they want to do because it's going to stretch your already overstretched schedule and you know that's not right for you. That doesn't mean that we're not involved in our kids' lives. It doesn't mean that we, don't really care about their fulfillment and them finding the things that they care about, but they have to understand the impact on the whole family. And so, not just saying no to things, but telling them why. Say, I really need like an hour before I go to sleep of quiet time and alone time. And again, my kids aren't 3; they're older now, so this is a lot more actionable for me. It might look different for someone else, but like oftentimes I'll have spent a couple hours hanging out with my 11-year-old and we've, had some quality time together that day. And he'll want to do one more thing for that last hour. And I'll say to him, hey buddy, mom needs her time now to kind of unwind and have a little alone time. That's important to me. And he doesn't always want to hear that, but now he understands better that like I'm a person too. I have needs too. And I think that's really beneficial for kids to learn early on is that their mothers are people with their own needs, and being able to raise a kid that can understand what a boundary is and respect that, I think is a valuable lesson for everyone.
Gosh, Meredith, you know what I love about what you just said is that you essentially are giving permission to the people who just listen to you say use those words of saying you don't need to feel guilty for taking care of yourself as well. Because so often I'll spend a lot of time in the DMs with people on Instagram, and almost 70% of the people that message me, when I ask them what their biggest challenges are as a working mom, they say the guilt. And what you're saying is you not only should you not feel guilty, but you are modeling for your kids, and that's an important life skill for them. So that is like such a freeing piece of feedback that you just shared, to be able to create the space where they they not only prioritize what it is they need, but they know that that's the right thing to do to model for their kids too, because they're teaching their kids a very imperative life skill.
Absolutely. We can't tell our kids to advocate for themselves if we don't know how to do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
it's really important.
Yeah. So often I find that people like set quote unquote boundaries, but it's honoring them and actually sticking to them. That's the hard part. And that's just your commitment of being dogmatic and steadfast about knowing what it is that you either need or value. And when you're really clear on those needs and those values, it makes it a lot easier for you to actually hold and honor those boundaries.
100%.
Okay, so a lot of people a lot of my clients, but also a lot of the listeners, have a spouse with ADHD, Meredith. And that becomes a little bit trickier because we are not their parents. Sometimes we might feel like we are, but that just introduces a completely different element, related to managing the clutter and the joint to-do list for the family. It's probably pretty complex, but would love for you to take a minute or two or three unpacking any sort of quick tips you might have for the moms listening where their spouse is the one who in the family that has ADHD.
Yeah, it can be very tricky. There's so many different dynamics that can happen. Maybe both spouses have ADHD. Everybody has different responsibilities and different workloads, but I think you really did actually touch on a really important thing to keep in mind as you introduced this question is we don't want to have to parent them or we don't want to treat them like a child. And that is a dynamic that can come up time and time again in couples where one partner has ADHD is that one of the partners becomes almost like that parent figure. And that's not good for either partner. We don't want to be parented as people with ADHD. We don't want to feel like we're not contributing in that way. One thing I think that can be really helpful is to really open up a line of communication around your current like state of responsibilities and how they look when you divide them up. Oftentimes, I think like we have a kid and we never really sit down and say, okay, these are your jobs, these are my jobs. Or if we do, it's kind of like what we've defaulted to and we haven't examined them through like the lens of our changing circumstances. So, an exercise I recommend to couples often is to sit down and write down like kind of that brain dump of the things that need to be done, put as many of them on there as possible. You can get like super granular with this, or you can keep it more broad. Like you can do like daily or weekly or whatever it is that you're really kind of struggling with the most as a couple. And then each person in the relationship can go through and highlight the tasks, either green, yellow, or red. So that green task is like, this is pretty easy for me to do. I don't mind doing this thing. I don't need to like come up with a strategy. I can just do it pretty automatically. Yellow is like, it's like sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's a little bit easier. And then red is like, this task is so hard for me. Like I have to jump through 100 hoops to get this to happen. And then after each partner does that, you compare your list and see it, look at that list and be like, oh my gosh, I've been doing tasks for the family that are like on my partner's green list. Like, why don't I give them those lists? So kind of do some reconfiguring potentially to kind of even the mental load of the tasks, not just like the number of tasks on the list. It's not perfect because you might have a bunch of tasks that are red for both of you. For those like red in both categories tasks, that's when you want to think about, do we have resources where we can outsource this? Or do we need to put our heads together to come up with some strategies to be able to make this easier? Are we kind of are we having expectations of what we should be accomplishing as a family that just aren't realistic? You know, that those red tasks can be really telling. So taking a look at those and seeing if that changes the status quo any, if you want to like move some tasks to each other's columns. And I think I like that exercise a lot because it's not just targeting the ADHD partner as you aren't doing enough. It's really looking at what are my strengths, what are your strengths, and is what we're doing right now honoring those strengths in the most effective way we could be doing things.
I love that. And it's very aligned to the same type of principles that I introduce and talk about a lot. So the language that I always use is, what is your highest and best use? Because your highest and best use might be, to your point, Meredith, your strengths, that is something that comes naturally to you or something that you really enjoy. It could be a development opportunity for you that you're focused on. Or it could be something that you just really value, like parenting. Your highest and best use is probably putting your kid down at night. It's probably not mowing the lawn when somebody else can do that. So I'll link this in the show notes. But for anyone listening, I am a proud partner of Peacock Parent, and they help give you resources, and it's a membership. But they provide resources that help you outsource so that you're able to focus on those highest and best use items. So to Meredith's point, if it's not something that you enjoy or are naturally good at, and you find that your partner is also not enjoying it or good at it, and you have the means, I absolutely recommend at this stage in life you get rid of it. That way you can focus on what's most important to you, which is self-care and time with your kids and investing in your marriage and your own health and that sort of thing. So thank you. I really love that recommendation. So, last real meaty question, Meredith, before we get into the lightning round questions. And that's around what's one piece of encouragement that you might offer to a mom who's feeling like, I'm constantly behind, I'm failing at life, I'm dropping all the balls. What would you tell them?
I really like to remind people that their worth and value is not tied to how many items they check off this imaginary to-do list we think the world has for us every day. There are a lot of things you are likely contributing to your family. People with ADHD have some really interesting strengths that can be really amazing in parenthood. So if you feel like you're not checking all the boxes, first of all, we all know no one is. And maybe those aren't the best boxes for you to be trying to check in the first place.
Yeah, I am a big believer in that. In fact, I'll link this in the show notes as well. One of my favorite free guides that I give out is helps people understand the difference between a wish list and a to-do list. A to-do list is actually something that needs done. It is you submitting the field trip forms for your kid and paying the dues so that way your child is able to go on the field trip. A wish list item is all those other things that surround and create most of our mental load and drain us of energy that are just wish list items. That's all they are. Like, yes, I would love to organize the photo albums from our last vacation. Do I need to get that done? No, it's creating pressure on us that we don't actually need. And moms are just naturally driven to want to be at their best for their kids and their families, and we sacrifice so much of our own mental clarity in the process. So, if you have not already listened or read that, I'm going to link it in the show notes. But it is my free guide on how to productively manage your to do list and keep it from controlling or overwhelming you. So, you can get that at workingmomsmovement.com/to do. But I mean, I think that is such a valuable point, Meredith, that we are so much more than what we do or don't get done each day. Okay, so lightning round questions about you. These I ask every guest that I have. So the first is, what is your go-to stress busting activity?
Getting out and moving my body. Sometimes that's a run or a hike or a walk or lifting weights, but something I prioritize every single day is some kind of movement. My ADHD brain is super busy. So when I'm moving, it gives me a little bit of relief from all the things that I'm being bombarded with. And it helps a ton with my emotional regulation and mental clarity throughout the day.
Yeah, I'm sure it helps with your managing your energy as well. So I must know when you are moving, whether that be running or lifting, is your mind going the entire time as well, or are you able to be present?
It's still going. Every day
Mhm.
is a little bit different. I have dropped weights on my toe before because
Oh
I
gosh.
was writing a post in my brain or something. But I will say, when I can really get into the zone of moving, I feel like that it gives my brain one thing to focus on and then opens up like that channel for a little bit more clarity. So I feel like I can be thinking about something. I have my best creative ideas when I'm out for a run or a really long
Wow.
walk or hike, because I think I'm still like in the background, putting one foot in front of the other. My body has that like stimulation, that input, and that's enough to kind of like calm some of the hyperactive thoughts and let some of the more primary ones come through.
That's
So
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I wish I could like completely turn off my brain, but like it actually feels really good to have those moments of clarity when I'm moving my body.
Yeah, I do all my best thinking in the shower. So I actually have a notepad in my shower. It's a waterproof notepad. Because to your point, it gives you a little bit of that mental breathing room to have some of those more creative thoughts. That's where I do my best work. Um, okay, what is the last book or podcast you really loved or geeked out on?
Does it have to be something that was like I did for like self-improvement?
No,
Because
you get to, no, it can be anything that makes you happy.
I have
Anything.
focused most of I love to read. I have focused most of my reading this year on reading for fun,
Mm.
which again, I think people with ADHD, especially, and all humans, need to be doing things just because it lights up their brain versus like, oh, this is going to help me, be more productive, or whatever it is we're trying to solve. I just finished a Stephen King book. I'm trying to remember the exact title. I'm so bad with numbers. It's like 11/23/63. It's those numbers might not be correct, but you'd be able to figure it out by that with
Yeah.
that information. But it's like it's not even a new book. It's like 10 years old, but it is a time traveler going back in time to try to stop JFK's assassination. So it was a very long book, but I got through it somehow, even with my ADHD brain, and I loved it.
So you actually read the book and not listen to it.
Yeah, I have two modes of consuming books. If it's
Mhm.
fiction, I usually will read it. I like having that book in front of me because I
Mhm.
do zone out a lot when I'm listening to an audiobook. But I
Mhm.
do really like audiobooks for self-help, memoir, that kind of thing. Do a lot of driving because I have three kids. So I like self-help because it's like you don't always have to like get every word in your brain. You don't
Hmm.
have to like hit rewind 1,000 times to figure out where you were. You can still get something out of it when you consume via audio. So I kind of like both formats for different reasons.
That's so funny. I'm the exact opposite because when I read the self-help stuff, I like to have my highlighter and sit there and be like, I'm going to go
Mhm.
back to the.
I mean, there will be the occasional self-help book that I'm like, oh wow, there is so much good info, and I'll end up buying a physical copy and going back and doing the highlighting.
Yeah,
But it's a good way to kind of like see if it's, something I'm just going to get a few nuggets from or something I want to dive deeper
right.
into.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Last lightning round question. If you could wave a magic wand, what task would you eliminate forever?
Think it's a toss up. I want to say right away, mopping and sweeping floors because that's what I hate the most. But I honestly think if I could do one thing, maybe it would be having to make dinner and make food for my family every single day of my life, only because I don't really hate cooking, but I hate everything that goes with it, like the
Hmm.
planning and the prepping and the remembering to buy ingredients. And it's just such a big job all the time. So that would free up a lot of space if I didn't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, I always, going back to that outsourcing comment, I always tell my listeners, if you can get rid of anything, prioritize cooking, unless you really, really enjoy it. And the reason being, it's something that you have to do every single day. Like your family is not going to stop needing to eat.
Yeah.
So if they're going to have to eat, then like that might be a really good use of your money versus a lot of people start outsourcing cleaning first. And it's like, you know what? That toilet only needs scrubbed once a month, but your
Mhm.
family needs to eat every single day.
Yeah, and multiple times a day. So that is
Yeah,
really good
I know.
advice. Simplify in that area for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, very last question, Meredith, for you is can you share with people a little bit more about what the Hummingbird Hive is, how people can reach you, whether you work with just women or if you work with men and children too? Just bring that to life for them.
Yeah, so the Hummingbird Hive is a membership community for adults with ADHD. It is not just limited towards women. We have some male members, but primarily women in that group. That group is focused on some gentle accountability, some community building, so that we feel less alone in this space as people with ADHD. We have a variety of meetings, but some of our most popular ones are like a Monday planning meeting where we just have that time blocked out to like look at our schedule, set priorities, and share them out loud so that there's a better chance they get done. I also have my book. It's called It All Makes Sense Now. There's a lot of practical strategies in that book as well. So that's a really good place to start if you are looking to understand how ADHD impacts you better or your child or your partner.
Perfect. And where can people find you, Meredith, beyond just my show notes?
So they can find me on Instagram at hummingbird_ADHD. I also am newly on Substack, but pouring a lot of energy into writing on my Substack page. I'm starting to talk about motherhood a lot more. So if you are a mom and you're looking to like get some feedback and advice, that would be a good place to find me as well. My Substack is called It All Makes Sense Now ADHD Insights.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I'm going to link both of those in the show notes. I'm going to include Meredith's book in the show notes. I will also include Peacock Parent. So, again, Peacock Parent, I'm a partner of theirs, but they are the organization that helps you find different types of service type communities that will help you with outsourcing. Then I will also include my free guide on how you can more productively manage your to-do list and keep it from controlling and overwhelming you. So get all that in the show notes. But Meredith, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been probably the number one topic I have wanted to focus on because I am realizing how many of the moms I engage with are just curious and needing the level of support that you offer. So thank you so much. Friends, thanks for listening. If you haven't yet, I would sure appreciate if you rate and review this podcast. Small business is hard, so I'm depending on y'all to help give it a lift. But until next time, if nobody's told you lately, you're doing a great job. You've got this, Mama.